At 2:47 a.m., the ER doors didn't open. They detonated. Rain and sirens poured into Tidewater University Hospital as a stretcher cut through the hallway like a convoy under fire. On it lay a 16-year-old boy turning blue, surrounded by men who moved like they'd rehearsed this disaster. Then the words hit me harder than the flatline. Too young to run a code blue. They said it like a verdict. Like my hands weren't steady enough to hold a life in place. But I saw what they didn't. A puncture mark high on his neck. Tissue dying around it. The same signature I'd seen on my brother before he died in this very building. This isn't just a medical emergency. It's a battlefield with clean floors and dirty secrets. Stay with me to the end and you'll learn what protocol can't teach. Tell me where you're watching from and hit like if you've ever been underestimated. The words still rang in Riley's ears as if they had been stamped into the air. Too young. The trauma bay smelled like bleach and warm plastic and rainwater tracked in on boots. The overhead lights were too bright for a night like this, making every drop of sweat on a forehead look like guilt. Nurses moved with the quiet urgency of people who had learned to keep their fear private. Secret Service agents held their positions at the doors and along the walls, bodies angled outward, eyes scanning the room instead of the patient. Their presence changed the geometry of everything. It turned the bay into a perimeter. Maddox stood at the foot of the stretcher like a commander who expected obedience. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being the one who paid for a mistake. His hands hovered over the crash cart quick and practiced as if the code was just another drill he had run 100 times. When the monitor went flat, he did not flinch. He simply nodded once. Start compressions. 2-inch depth. Switch every 2 minutes, he said. Tessa Wolfe climbed onto the stool without breaking eye contact with the patient. Her palms landed on the center of the boy's chest, and she began compressions steady as a metronome. Riley watched the sternum dip and rise under Tessa's weight. It was violent and necessary. The kind of violence that meant you were still fighting. A respiratory therapist stepped in on Riley's left, already pulling a bag valve mask into position. A second nurse cracked open a drawer in the crash cart and called out medications by name. A junior resident, Logan Pierce, tried to wedge himself closer to Maddox's eager hands ready to prove usefulness. Riley stayed near the head of the bed, close enough to smell the boy's breath through the mask, close enough to see his lashes tremble with each forced ventilation. His face was pale in the harsh light, the blue around his lips deepening with every second the oxygen refused to stay in his blood. It was the neck that kept pulling Riley's gaze back. High on the right side, just below the jawline, was that puncture. Not a messy scratch. Not a careless needle poke. A single, clean entry point. And around it, a ring of skin that looked wrong. The color was off like bruising that had no business being there yet. The tissue had a dull gray cast, as if it had been starved. Riley leaned in. The mark glistened faintly. "Maddox," she said, keeping her voice low but clear. "Look at the neck. That's not an IV site." Maddox did not turn his head. He came in crashing. "We don't have time for dermatology." Riley's jaw tightened. "It's necrosis." Logan Pierce gave a small laugh under his breath, the kind of laugh people used when they wanted to align themselves with power. Necrosis in 10 minutes. Riley looked at him once. Just once. The look was enough to shut him up, but not enough to erase the smirk that lingered on his face. Maddox finally glanced at the neck, not with curiosity, but with irritation, like a man forced to look at an inconvenience. His eyes flicked over the mark and moved on. "Epinephrine. 1 milligram," he said. A nurse pushed the dose. Tessa kept compressions going. The respiratory therapist squeezed the bag, watching the chest rise. Riley's hands were still, but her mind was sprinting. A puncture that high was unusual in a hospital setting. If someone had tried to place a central line in the field, it would not look like that. If someone had attempted an injection into the jugular in panic, it would be messy. This was clean. This was confident. She thought about the way the boy's pupils had looked when the mask first came down. Pinpoint. Classic opioid. But opioids did not burn tissue like this, not unless something else rode along with them. A Secret Service agent shifted at the door, murmuring into his sleeve. Another agent angled himself closer to the crash cart, eyes on Maddox's hands, watching every medication as if the hospital staff were the threat. Tessa's voice came out in clipped bursts between compressions. Rhythm check in 10. Maddox nodded. Prepare to switch compressors. Riley's mouth went dry. She had heard Maddox's voice in too many resuscitations. He ran codes with confidence and speed, and most of the time it worked. When it failed, he blamed physiology, bad luck god. He never blamed the plan. Riley had learned early that he hated being questioned most when he was being watched. Tonight, the entire federal government was watching. Riley leaned closer to Tessa, using the noise of the room as cover. Do you see the ring around it? Tessa did not turn her head. She kept compressions perfect and spoke through her teeth. I see it. Does it remind you of Luke? That was the first time Tessa's rhythm faltered. Not much, a fraction. But Riley saw it. Tessa recovered instantly, palms pressing down again with renewed force. Don't say his name in here, Tessa murmured. Not with them listening. Riley swallowed. The last time she had stood in this hospital with her throat tight and her heart loud, she had been a student in a too big white coat, standing behind a glass door because she was not allowed in. She had watched her brother's chest rise and fall under compressions, and she had watched the monitor refuse to give him back. The report said overdose. The police said it was tragedy. The hospital said the team followed protocol. Riley had carried that word like a stone. Protocol. It had felt like an excuse that wore a lab coat. Rhythm check, Tessa said. Hands lifted. Silence hit like a wave. Everyone stared at the monitor. A line, nothing else. Maddox's voice stayed calm. Resume compressions, epi every 3 to 5. Riley's pulse kicked. We need naloxone. Maddox's head snapped toward her. His eyes were cold and bright. No. It's opioid pattern, she insisted. Pinpoint pupils. Respiratory collapse. We're not running a street overdose, Maddox said. We're running a code. That's a patient, Riley said, voice rising despite herself. Not a script. Logan Pierce shifted uncomfortably. A nurse looked from Riley to Maddox, waiting to see which direction the current would pull. Maddox leaned in close enough that Riley could smell mint gum on his breath. His voice dropped to a quiet threat. You want to practice independence, Harper. Do it on someone who doesn't have agents at the door. Riley felt heat crawl up her neck. She could feel eyes on her back the way she always could when Maddox decided to make an example. She had lived inside that pressure since July, since the first day she stepped into the resident workroom and found her name misspelled on a locker label. Harper, Haper, Harper. Maddox had looked at the label and smiled like it was funny. Get used to it, he had said. This place will chew you up if you let it. That first month he had called her kid in front of nurses. He had corrected her loudly over minor things. He had taken the lead on every interesting procedure and handed her paperwork. When she asked to run a code, he had laughed. Too young, he had said then, too. Learn to watch first. Riley had watched until watching tasted like weakness. Now, she watched Tessa compressing the boy's chest, and she felt that glass door in her memory, the cold handle she could not turn. She stepped closer to the head of the bed and spoke to the respiratory therapist. How was he found? The therapist blinked, thrown by the question. They didn't say much. Brought him in hot. Said he stopped breathing on the way. A Secret Service agent barked, "Stop asking questions." Riley turned toward the agent. His face was unreadable, a mask polished by training. I need history, Riley said. Any allergies, any medications, any known exposures. You need to keep him alive, the agent replied. Riley held his gaze. I'm trying. The agent did not answer. He shifted his stance like a man deciding whether she was a problem. Maddox took advantage of the moment. Back to your lane, Harper. Riley's hands curled into fists, then relaxed. She forced her breathing slow. She had learned how to control panic in anatomy lab and trauma rotations in the months since Luke. Panic made you clumsy. clumsy got you killed. That was true in combat medicine, and it was true here. She looked down again at the puncture. The faint residue at the edge caught the light. Yellowish. Not dried blood, not iodine, something else. Riley's mind opened a file she had tried to lock away. Luke on a stretcher. Luke's neck. Luke's autopsy notes. A line she had reread until the words blurred. Small puncture wound noted on right lateral neck. Surrounding tissue discoloration. She had asked the coroner about it once. He had shrugged and said it could be from an attempted IV. Then he had looked at her like she was a grieving sister fishing for meaning. Riley's grief had not gone away. It had just changed shape. The nurse at the crash cart called out, "Second dose EPI ready." Maddox nodded. "Give it." Riley's eyes flicked to the cart, to the lined-up syringes, to the orderly logic of resuscitation. EPI compressions, airway rhythm checks. It was clean. It was controllable. It was also blind to anything it did not expect. Riley turned toward Tessa. If it's opioid plus paralytic, he could have stopped breathing before anyone knew. Tessa's face was tight with effort. "Talk to Maddox." Riley's voice sharpened. "I am." Tessa's eyes flashed. "Then pick your moment. Don't get yourself thrown out. Not tonight." Riley knew what Tessa meant. Maddox could have her removed from the room with one sentence. In a normal code, that would be humiliating. In this code, with agents watching, it would be career-ending. Riley looked around the bay and took inventory the way her father had taught her in a different kind of emergency. Her father had been a Marine medic before he became a high school football coach. He used to tell Riley and Luke stories at the kitchen table, stories about keeping your head when the world was loud. In the chaos, Riley noticed small things. The way Maddox kept glancing toward the door, not at the agents but at the hallway beyond them. The way Logan Pierce positioned himself so that he could be seen like visibility meant competence. The way one of the agents at the wall kept his eyes on Riley more than anyone else. The way the boy's skin near the puncture looked like it was slowly spreading outward. Riley stepped closer to the neck again, careful not to get in the way of the airway team. She pulled her penlight from her pocket and checked the pupils. Pinpoint. She spoke quieter now. "Naloxone won't hurt." Maddox's eyes narrowed. "It will confuse the picture. It will clarify it," Riley said. "If he responds, we know one part of what's killing him." Maddox's mouth tightened. "You're not leading this code." Riley felt something hard settle into place inside her. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She chose a different angle. Tessa Riley said how long since arrival. Tessa counted under her breath between compressions. 3 minutes. Riley looked at the monitor. She looked at the boy's face. She looked at the puncture. Luke had lasted 6 minutes before his brain stopped being his. Riley's stomach rolled. She turned to the nurse at the cart. "Draw naloxone. 4 milligrams." The nurse hesitated, eyes flicking toward Maddox like a child caught reaching for a cookie. Maddox snapped, "No one gives anything without my order." Riley's voice stayed steady. "I'm ordering it." Maddox's face went red in a way Riley had only seen when he was being challenged in public. "You are a resident." Riley nodded once. "And he's dying." Logan Pierce muttered, "Jesus." Maddox stepped toward Riley, closing distance fast, using his body like a wall. His voice dropped, dangerous quiet. "You are not going to make a spectacle in my bay." Riley met his eyes, then stopped treating it like a performance. Maddox stared at her for a long second, and Riley saw something beneath the arrogance. Not fear of the patient dying, not fear of being wrong, fear of losing control. He turned away and barked, "Continue compressions." "Prepare bicarbonate. Get me a blood gas." Riley did not move. She held her ground at the head of the bed, close enough to see the boy's throat muscles twitch with each ventilated breath. The nurse at the cart made a decision. She drew up naloxone with quick, practiced hands and capped the syringe without looking at Maddox. Maddox noticed. His gaze snapped to the syringe like it was a weapon. "Put that down," he said. Tessa spoke up, voice low but firm, still compressing. "Doctor, we're losing him." Maddox's jaw worked. He glanced toward the door again. The agents were watching. The nurses were watching. Even Logan Pierce looked uncertain now the smirk gone. Maddox took a breath and nodded once as if granting mercy. "Fine," he said, "1 dose. But if it does nothing, we move on." Riley did not thank him. She took the syringe from the nurse, her gloves squeaking faintly as she adjusted her grip. She moved to the IV line, eyes locked on the boy's face as if she could will him back. "Push slowly," Tessa said between compressions. Riley nodded. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Come on." As she prepared the injection, the Secret Service agent who had been watching her stepped closer. His voice was quiet, edged with warning. "Whatever you're doing, do it fast." Riley did not look at him. "If you want fast, stop blocking the staff." The agent did not reply. He just stood there, a shadow with a badge. Riley pushed the naloxone into the line. For a second, nothing changed. Then the boy's chest gave a small involuntary heave under Tessa's hands, like a body trying to remember how to be alive. Riley's eyes snapped to the monitor, a thin flicker of activity. Not a stable rhythm, not a heartbeat you could trust, but not a flat line anymore. Tessa's voice lifted slightly. "I'm seeing something." Maddox leaned in, eyes narrowed. He did not look pleased. He looked annoyed that a resident had been right in front of witnesses. Riley watched the boy's face, the slight shift of his jaw, the faint movement at the corners of his eyelids. She checked the pupils again. Still pinpoint, but something in the rigidity had eased. Riley's mind raced faster. Opioid was part of it, but not all of it. The necrosis around the puncture did not match an ordinary overdose. A paralytic agent could explain why he stopped breathing suddenly, why the oxygen never had a chance, why the heart followed. Riley turned to Maddox. "We need talks now, expanded panel." Maddox's voice went cold. "Standard talks, later." Riley felt her patience snap cleanly. "Not later." Maddox stared at her. "You're pushing your luck." Riley nodded. "I know." The boy's skin felt cooler than it should. Riley reached for the stethoscope and placed it on the chest, listening to the faint mechanical whisper of air being pushed into lungs. She heard nothing else. The room hummed with the sound of compressions and the bag valve mask and the crash cart drawers opening and closing. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled over Norfolk like artillery in the distance. Riley looked at the puncture again and saw right at the edge of the mark a faint smear that looked almost like dried mustard. It caught the red of the monitor light and turned darker. She thought of Luke again, not as a body on a gurney, but as a voice. Luke teasing her for studying too much. Luke texting her pictures of his terrible hospital cafeteria meals. Luke calling her after his shifts, tired but bright, telling her that medicine was war with paperwork. The night Luke died, Riley had driven to the hospital with her hands shaking on the wheel, convinced that if she got there fast enough, she could fix it. She had arrived to find him behind glass, a team of strangers moving around him, their words too calm. She had watched the monitor go flat. She had watched hands stop. She had watched someone pull the sheet up. She had watched Maddox walk out of the bay afterward, calm as ever, telling her mother, "We did everything we could." At the time, Riley had believed him. Now, standing over another teenager with the same mark, she felt that belief crack. Maddox spoke again, voice sharp. "Another episode. Rhythm check in 30. Riley's eyes locked on him. "Why did you call him the president's kid?" Maddox's head turned slowly as if he had not expected that question. His eyes narrowed not in confusion, but in calculation. "What did you say he asked?" Riley did not back down. "You said it before anyone said who he was." Logan Pierce shifted like he wanted to disappear. A nurse froze mid-motion, her hand hovering over a drawer handle. Maddox's expression did not change much, but something in his posture tightened. "Everybody knows who he is." "No," Riley said. "Everybody recognizes his face. That's different." The Secret Service agent at the door glanced toward Maddox, then away like a reflex. Riley saw it. A tiny communication. A glance that carried a message. Riley's stomach sank as if a trap door had opened under her. Maddox's voice went flatter. "Focus on the patient." "I am," Riley replied. "That's the point." Maddox stepped closer, his shoulder almost brushing Riley's. His voice dropped to a hiss. You want to interrogate me, do it after this is over. Riley kept her face still. After he's dead. Maddox's eyes flashed. Watch your mouth. Riley turned away from him and moved to the lab phone mounted on the wall. She picked it up, thumb-tapping the extension from memory. She had called the lab so many times she could do it half asleep. The line rang once. A tired voice answered, "Lab." "This is Dr. Harper in Trauma Bay 3, Riley said. "I need talks. Expanded panel, now." There was a pause, then a sigh. "We need attending authorization." Riley glanced at Maddox. He was watching her now, eyes hard. Riley tightened her grip on the phone. "Put it in process. I'll send the sample with nursing." "Doctor," the lab tech said, voice cautious. "I can't run it without the sign-off." Riley's gaze slid back to the boy. The monitor flickered again, weak and irregular. Riley lowered her voice. "We have federal agents in the room and a patient who was injected. If we wait, we lose the window." The lab tech hesitated. "Send the sample. I'll flag it." Riley hung up and looked toward Tessa. "Draw blood, 2 tubes, seal them." Tessa nodded without asking permission. She had worked in this hospital long enough to know when rules were a luxury. Maddox's voice cut through the bay. "You don't get to run parallel operations." Riley turned toward him. "Then run the right operation." Maddox's face tightened. He looked like a man restraining himself from saying something uglier because of who was watching. He motioned at Logan Pierce. "Get me an ultrasound." Logan hurried away, eager to be useful again. Riley watched the patient's neck. The puncture mark seemed to pulse under the skin, a small, ugly mouth that refused to close. A nurse slid in beside Riley with a needle and tubes. She found a vein and drew quickly, hands steady. The blood filled the tube dark and thick. Riley took the tube and held it up. For a second, under the harsh light, she imagined she could see poison moving in it. She set it in a labeled bag, her handwriting tight and controlled. Name unknown. Male. Time 0252. She handed it to another nurse. "Take it straight to lab. Do not let anyone touch it but you." A Secret Service agent stepped forward, blocking the path for a heartbeat. His eyes dropped to the bag. "What is that?" "Evidence," Riley said. The agent's jaw clenched. He looked at Maddox as if waiting for instruction. Maddox did not speak. Riley held the agent's gaze until he stepped aside. The nurse hurried out. The trauma bay doors swung shut again, sealing them back inside. The monitor beeped with a weak, irregular pattern that threatened to fade at any second. Tessa's compressions never wavered. Sweat ran down her temple and disappeared into her mask. Riley looked at the boy's face and felt the strange intimacy of emergency medicine. A stranger's life in your hands. A stranger's blood on your gloves. A stranger's mother somewhere out there who had no idea how close the edge was. Maddox moved closer to the crash cart and snapped open a drawer, pulling out another medication with a sharp motion. His fingers were slightly unsteady now, not enough to be obvious, but enough for Riley to notice. He caught her watching and his eyes hardened. "You think you're smarter than me," he said quietly. Riley shook her head once. "I think you're missing something." Maddox's voice lowered. "You think your brother died because someone wanted him dead." The sentence hit Riley like a shove. Her throat tightened. "Don't talk about Luke." Maddox's eyes did not soften. "People die in this city for all kinds of reasons, Harper. Drug overdoses, bad decisions, bad timing. Not everything is a conspiracy." Riley felt her hands go cold. Then why did Luke have the same mark? Maddox stared at her for a long moment. The room felt smaller. Even the agent seemed to lean in without moving. Maddox's mouth opened. Then a different sound cut through the bay. A sharp rising alarm from the monitor. The weak rhythm was faltering again. Tessa's voice lifted. "We're losing him." Maddox snapped back into motion. "Resume full compressions. Prepare to shock if indicated." Riley's eyes locked on the boy's throat. On the puncture. On the dying tissue. The air in the bay felt charged, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Riley pulled on a fresh pair of gloves, the latex snapping tight against her wrists. She reached toward the crash cart, fingers hovering over the naloxone kit again, then over the airway supplies, then over the vial tray. Her voice cut through the noise, clear and steady, not asking permission. "Naloxone," she said, holding out her hand. For half a second, nobody moved. In the red and green glow of monitors, the room seemed to take its cue from Maddox's face. He stood at the foot of the bed with his shoulders squared, jaw set, as if stillness itself could force the heart to cooperate. Tessa kept compressions going. The motion was brutal, and precise elbows, locked palms, stacked the patient's ribs, taking the punishment that kept his brain fed for a few more seconds. A nurse named Marin, new enough to still look for permission in people's eyes, lifted a syringe from the cart and hesitated. Her gaze flicked to Maddox. Maddox's stare hardened. "We already gave it." Riley didn't raise her voice. And he responded. Now he's slipping again. The monitor stuttered a weak, irregular rhythm that looked like a dying insect on the screen. Not enough, not stable, just a refusal to disappear completely. Riley leaned in close to the boy's face. The ventilations forced his chest to rise, but it did not look like breathing. It looked like imitation. His lips remained blue, and the skin under his eyes had taken on that waxy pallor that made people look older than they were. She checked the pupils again. Still tight, still pinned. "This is not just opioids," she said mostly to herself, but loud enough for the bay to hear. "There's something riding on top of it." Maddox snapped, "Speculation does not resuscitate a heart." Riley held out her hand again, steady in the air between them. "Naloxone." Marin moved to pass the syringe to Riley. Maddox's hand shot out, palm up, a silent stop sign. Tessa's voice cut through, clipped with effort. "Dr. Compressions are getting harder. Chest is stiffening." That sentence landed with quiet terror. Stiffening meant time. It meant blood not moving the way it should. It meant the line between salvageable and too late was thinning. Maddox looked at the agents along the wall. Their attention was fixed, their faces unreadable. He looked at Riley. He looked at the monitor. "Give it," he said, like he was granting permission to the weather. Riley took the syringe and pushed it into the line slow enough to be deliberate, fast enough to matter. Her eyes stayed on the boy's face. Her ears tracked every sound in the room, every change in the rhythm of the beeps. The monitor flickered. The rhythm did not stabilize, but it stopped collapsing. The line gained a little strength, like a muscle remembering what it was designed to do. Tessa exhaled through her teeth. "I've got something." Riley's pulse hammered once hard, then settled. She did not let herself celebrate, not yet. She turned to Marin. "Draw another blood gas, and I want tox expedited." Marin nodded and moved. This time she did not look at Maddox for permission. Maddox's mouth tightened. The tiniest sign of irritation, the kind Riley had seen in him before, when someone else got credit inside his territory. Riley stepped closer to the neck again. The puncture mark looked uglier now under the red tint of the emergency lighting. The ring of dying tissue seemed to darken as she watched, as if the poison were still working its way outward. The smell shifted. It was faint at first, easy to miss under bleach and sweat, but Riley caught it sharp and chemical. Not antiseptic. Something else. Like burned plastic. The overhead lights flickered once. A nurse glanced up. Power just dipped. Tessa's compressions never changed. "Keep moving." Maddox barked focus. Riley's eyes slid past Maddox to the doorway. The Secret Service agent who had been watching her had stepped closer to the threshold, head tilted, as if listening to something in his earpiece. His hand hovered near his jacket. The geometry of the room tightened again. The perimeter adjusted. Riley's throat went dry. She looked at the patient's face, then at Maddox's hands, then back to the neck. The puncture mark held her like gravity. "Tessa," Riley said lower now. "The tissue is dying around the site. That's not from a routine injection." Tessa's voice was steady. "Then name it." Riley swallowed. "It looks like a caustic carrier. Something that burns on entry. Something meant to leave a signature." Maddox's voice cut in sharp. "Stop. You are not diagnosing political assassinations in my trauma bay." Riley turned toward him. Then explain why you knew who he was before anyone said it. Silence tightened the air. Even the bag valve mask seemed louder for a second. Maddox stared at her, and for the first time that night his composure slipped just enough for Riley to see what lived underneath. Not fear of being wrong. Fear of being exposed. He leaned in, voice low, meant for her alone. You think you can corner me in front of them. You think you can win. Riley didn't flinch. I think you care more about control than the patient. Maddox's eyes flashed. You have no idea what you are touching. Riley met his gaze and let the words hang between them. She did not answer. She let the monitor speak for her, the thin, stubborn rhythm still fighting. A sudden crackle came through the ceiling speakers. An overhead announcement started and died mid-syllable. The lights flickered again. Then they went out. Darkness swallowed the bay so completely Riley could feel it. The monitors died. The mechanical hum of equipment cut off. For a fraction of a second there was only breath and the wet sound of compressions in the dark. Then the generators slammed on. Red emergency lights ignited along the walls, bathing everything in a harsh crimson glow that made blood look black. In that brief gap between dark and red, Riley heard it. Glass shattering against tile. A vial hitting the floor. A small, violent sound that felt too deliberate to be accidental. Nobody move, a Secret Service voice snapped. Flashlights snapped on beams cutting through red haze. One beam swept across Tessa on the stool across Marin's gloved hands across Riley's face and then stopped on Maddox. Maddox was not looking at the agents. He was staring at the monitor. The monitor was back on now, a faint weak rhythm crawling across it. And Maddox's expression did not show shock. It showed relief. Riley felt her stomach drop. She turned toward the floor. Near the crash cart, something glistened in the red light. Liquid spreading slowly from a cluster of glass shards. It looked thicker than saline, darker than epinephrine. Riley stepped toward it, careful not to slip. The smell hit her harder now, chemical and wrong. What medication was in that vial? She asked, voice sharp. No one answered. Tessa kept compressions going, but her eyes darted once toward the glass. She saw it. She understood the danger of it. A senior agent stepped forward, flashlight fixed on Maddox's hands. Doctor, answer her question. Maddox's shoulders lifted slightly like someone taking a breath before lying. Epinephrine. For the code. Riley's eyes flicked to the crash cart drawer where epi-syringes sat in their slots accounted for. She had counted them without thinking. A habit built from surviving Maddox's scrutiny. We haven't used any that are missing, Riley said. Maddox's jaw clenched. Riley pointed to the glass. That didn't come from the cart. Maddox's gaze slid to the floor and back. He said nothing. The agent took one step closer. Doctor. Maddox's voice came out clipped. I brought an extra vial. Redundancy. Riley's mind raced. Redundancy was what people said when they wanted their lie to sound responsible. The smell rising off the spilled liquid did not smell like epinephrine. It smelled like something that did not belong in a code. Riley looked at the patient again. The rhythm was still weak. The chest rose under ventilation. The skin remained gray at the puncture site. Tessa, Riley said, "Do not let anyone near that glass. Nobody." Tessa gave a tight nod without stopping compressions. Maddox's eyes narrowed. You're turning this into theater. Riley's voice went cold. You turned it into something else when you brought that vial. The Secret Service agent at the doorway shifted. His head tilted again, listening to something. His posture tightened. Riley felt the room tense with him. The trauma bay doors slammed open. A woman entered like she had been waiting her whole life for a room to obey her. She wore a dark tailored suit and a coat that still held rein along the shoulders. Her hair was perfect. Her face looked carved from calm. She did not hesitate at the sight of blood and tubing. She did not flinch at the alarms. Secret Service moved with her, forming a protective shape. Riley recognized her instantly. Evelyn Whitman, First Lady, Tyler's mother. Evelyn's eyes went to her son for one fraction of a second, then lifted to scan the room. Her gaze landed on Maddox, then on Riley's resident badge, then back to the bed. Who is in charge here? Evelyn asked. Maddox opened his mouth. Riley spoke first. I am, ma'am, Dr. Riley Harper. Maddox's head snapped toward her, disbelief and anger flashing across his features. Evelyn's eyes narrowed slightly. She took Riley in the way people in power evaluated threats. Young face, resident badge. A woman standing in front of men who were used to ordering rooms. How old are you? Evelyn asked. 24, Riley answered. Evelyn looked at her son again. For the first time, something in her expression shifted. Not fear, not grief, tension. The kind of tension people carried when the ground under them was not stable. Behind Riley, the monitor spiked with a shriek. The rhythm faltered again, the line breaking into jagged instability. Tessa's voice rose. He's dropping. Maddox moved instinctively. Resume full compressions. Charge the defibrillator. Riley watched the boy's neck. The puncture mark seemed to pulse in the red light. The dying tissue ring looked wider. The smell of the spilled vial mixed with the smell of sweat and fear. Riley's voice cut through the noise, clear and controlled. He is not just crashing from cardiac arrest. He's been injected. Maddox snapped, stop. Riley ignored him and addressed Evelyn. Opioids are part of it. His pupils were pinpoint. He responded to naloxone. But there's another agent, a paralytic pattern. Respiratory failure before the heart. That puncture site shows necrosis. Maddox stepped closer, voice tight. You have no evidence to support that. Riley met Evelyn's eyes. This is attempted murder. Evelyn's expression did not change. That stillness was the most frightening thing in the room. She turned slightly to one of the agents. Clear the room. Maddox protested immediately. Ma'am, I need to remain with my patient. Evelyn did not look at him. Everyone out, except Dr. Harper and the nurse. Two agents stepped toward Maddox. Their hands were firm but professional. Maddox's face flushed with outrage. This is my trauma bay, he snapped. One agent said quietly, not tonight. Maddox's gaze cut to Riley. The hatred there was clean and focused. He was being removed in front of witnesses, in front of the First Lady, in front of his own staff. His power was bleeding. The other residents and nurses shifted toward the door, moving as they were directed. Logan Pierce's face was pale. He avoided Riley's eyes. As Maddox was escorted out, his gaze flicked toward the broken vial on the floor. He looked away fast, but not fast enough. Riley saw it. When the doors closed, the trauma bay changed shape again. The perimeter tightened into something suffocating. Tessa kept compressions going, her breathing audible through her mask. Riley stood near the head of the bed, watching the airway, checking the monitor, listening for changes in the lungs. Evelyn stepped closer to her son. She did not touch him immediately. She hovered controlled, as if contact might shatter something she was holding in place. Riley's voice stayed clinical. His heart rate is still unstable. We need to identify the second agent. We need expanded talks, and we need it fast. Evelyn's gaze remained on Tyler. How long has he been down? She asked. Riley answered. 4 minutes since arrival. Longer before that. We are within the window, but it is closing. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Keep him alive. Riley nodded. That is the plan. Evelyn looked at Riley, then truly looked. You said he was injected. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn's voice lowered. He told me 3 weeks ago he found something. Riley felt her stomach tighten. Found what? Evelyn's eyes did not move from her son. Something about his father's re-election. Something that would destroy us. Tessa's hands faltered for a fraction of a second, then regained their rhythm. Riley heard it in the sound of compressions, a tiny stutter. Riley adjusted the IV flow, forcing herself to keep her hands steady. Ma'am, I need specifics. Any names, any exposures, any threats. Evelyn's throat moved as she swallowed. He said the vice president was stealing. Riley's breath caught. Vice President Nolan Price. Evelyn nodded once. The motion was small, restrained. Shell vendors. Money moved through procurement contracts. Medical supply routes. Campaign funds laundered through health systems. Tyler found documents. Riley's mind sharpened. Medical supply routes, procurement, hospital contracts, the kind of paper trail Luke would have followed out of stubborn ethics. Riley kept her voice calm. Who else knew Tyler had those documents? Evelyn hesitated. For the first time, her armor showed a crack. Not pity, not softness, exhaustion. I told him to stay quiet, she said, to protect the family. Riley watched the monitor, watched the rhythm fight, watched the oxygen saturation crawl upward by a fraction. You told him to stay quiet, Riley repeated. Not accusing, just anchoring the reality. Evelyn's eyes lifted to Riley's face. The look was sharp. You have an opinion. Riley kept her voice neutral. I have a patient, and someone tried to kill him. Evelyn turned her gaze back to Tyler. Her hand finally lifted and brushed his hair, a motion so careful it looked rehearsed. Riley saw a tremor in Evelyn's fingers. It lasted a heartbeat, then vanished. Riley felt a chill in her spine. The way Evelyn touched the puncture mark area without flinching. The way she held herself like she had seen crisis before. Not just as a mother, as someone familiar with a controlled disaster. Evelyn's voice came out quiet. If Tyler talks, price goes down. If price goes down, a lot of people go down. Riley thought of Maddox's words. You have no idea what you are touching. Riley kept her gaze on Tyler. People do not inject teenagers in hospitals over paperwork. Evelyn's mouth tightened. That paperwork pays for wars. It buys silence. Tessa's compressions continued steady. Her voice broke through, strained. Pulse check. Riley nodded. Stop compressions. Tessa lifted her hands. Silence slammed down. Riley watched the monitor, watched the line, watched for something that would hold. A rhythm, weak, irregular, but present. Riley pressed fingers to Tyler's carotid and felt it. Faint. There. We have a pulse, Riley said. Tessa exhaled a sound that was half relief and half fury. Thank God. Evelyn did not move. Her face stayed controlled, but her eyes softened a fraction as she looked at her son. Riley did not let herself relax. A pulse was not victory. It was permission to keep fighting. Start vasopressors, Riley said to Tessa. Prepare for intubation support. Keep him ventilated. We need to stabilize and we need to isolate the cause. Tessa nodded, already moving. Evelyn's gaze sharpened again. How soon will talks confirm? Riley answered honestly. If the lab runs an expanded panel immediately, we can get preliminary results in under an hour. Full confirmation longer. Evelyn's jaw tightened. An hour is a long time. Riley looked at the broken vial on the floor. The spilled liquid glistened under red light, ignored by no one yet untouched. Someone tried to shorten his time. Evelyn followed Riley's gaze to the glass. That is not standard medication. Riley's voice stayed careful. Oh, ma'am. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Who brought it? Riley did not name Maddox out loud. Not yet. The room was sealed, but walls had ears and careers died from wrong timing. Riley said it appeared during the blackout. It was not taken from the crash cart. Evelyn turned slightly, speaking into her sleeve mic. Her voice was low-controlled. Orders coded language. Riley caught only fragments. Secure, evidence, locked down. When Evelyn finished, she looked back at Riley. You are certain this was an injection? Riley nodded, yes. Evelyn studied Riley for a long moment. And you chose to challenge the attending. Riley kept her chin level. I chose to treat what was in front of me. Evelyn's expression stayed still, but her eyes held something sharp. Respect was too generous a word. Recognition was closer, like she understood the kind of person who refused to step aside. Tessa returned to Tyler's side, adjusting tubing, checking lines, murmuring vitals under her breath. She moved like someone who had done this in chaos before. Riley glanced at the doorway. The agents outside were visible through the small window silhouettes and shoulders, weapons, and posture. Riley felt the sealed nature of the bay pressing inward. She leaned toward Evelyn, lowering her voice. Ma'am, if Tyler found evidence and someone attempted to kill him, the threat does not end because he has a pulse. Evelyn's eyes stayed on Tyler. You are thinking like a soldier. Riley's throat tightened. I am thinking like a doctor who has seen what happens when powerful people decide a death is convenient. Evelyn turned her head slightly, just enough to look at Riley. You have personal history. Riley hesitated. She did not want to place Luke in this room, not with federal agents listening outside, not with Maddox somewhere in the hallway with his pride bleeding. Still, the truth sat in her chest like a weight. My brother died here, Riley said quietly. Same mark. Tessa's hands paused for a breath, then continued. She did not look up, but the tension in her shoulders spoke. Evelyn's face changed just slightly, the smallest narrowing of her eyes. The kind of shift that suggested a calculation was being made. Riley saw it and felt cold. Evelyn was not just a mother trying to save her son. She was a woman balancing forces. She stepped closer to Tyler and lowered her voice. Tyler, stay with me. Tyler did not respond, but his eyelids fluttered. A small movement. The first sign of consciousness trying to surface. Riley leaned in, watching his breathing, watching the monitor, watching the throat. Tyler. Riley said, voice calm, close to his ear. You're in the hospital. You are safe right now. Can you hear me? His lashes trembled again. His lips parted slightly as if a word were trying to escape. Evelyn's hand tightened around his fingers. Tessa looked at Riley, eyes wide above her mask. He's coming around. Riley nodded once. She felt the room tighten again, the air becoming too dense, as if the bay itself anticipated what a waking witness meant. Evelyn's eyes flicked to the door window, then back to Tyler. Riley heard radio chatter through the wall, faint and clipped. The cadence of security moving, the sound of boots in the corridor. She did not look away from Tyler. His eyes opened a fraction, unfocused at first, then shifting as if searching for something solid in the red light. His lips moved. Riley leaned closer, close enough to hear the breath behind the word. Mom, Tyler whispered. Evelyn's composure cracked. Tears appeared without warning, spilling down her face as if gravity finally won. She bowed her head toward him, voice shaking for the first time. I'm here. Riley watched Tyler's gaze drift past his mother to Riley's face, confusion and fear mixing with the sedation. He tried to swallow. His throat moved with effort. Riley placed a gentle hand near his shoulder, careful with lines and tubes. Tyler, do you remember anything about the injection? Who was near you? Tyler's eyes widened slightly as if the question pulled him out of fog. His lips moved again. A breath, a word that did not fully form. Riley heard movement outside the door, not panicked, but purposeful. She felt it in the rhythm of footsteps, the way the corridor sound changed when people moved as a unit. Tessa's head lifted. Her eyes darted to the door window, then back to Riley. Evelyn's fingers tightened on Tyler's hand until her knuckles whitened. Riley stayed at the head of the bed, listening to Tyler's thin breath, and the faint radio chatter bleeding through the wall, holding steady in the red emergency light as the room pressed inward around them. The footsteps outside the trauma bay did not sound like hospital staff. They were too synchronized, like a team moving on a hallway they already owned. Riley kept her eyes on Tyler's face. His pupils were still small, his gaze unfocused, but the fear in it was clear. It was the kind of fear that did not come from pain. It came from recognition. He tried to swallow again, throat working against the tube and the dryness. He rasped the word barely more than air. Tessa leaned in from the side, one hand steadying a line, the other hovering near Tyler's shoulder. Easy, don't fight it. Tyler's eyes flicked past his mother to the small window in the door. Shadows moved out there, sliding across the glass in a pattern that tightened Riley's chest. Riley angled her body slightly, putting herself between Tyler and the door, without making it look like she was doing it. She kept her voice calm, the same tone she used when she had to talk someone back from panic. Tyler, she said, look at me. One word at a time. His lips trembled. Back. Evelyn's fingers clenched around her son's hand. Tears were still on her cheeks, but her voice had snapped back into steel. Nobody is coming in here. Riley did not answer that. She did not offer comfort, she could not guarantee. She listened. The corridor sound changed again, a pause, then a faint click like a latch being tested. Tessa's eyes lifted to Riley. Riley moved one step toward the wall panel and hit the call button for security anyway. The small light blinked. No voice came through. Power was still on emergency circuits. Communications were not reliable. The latch clicked again, harder. Riley's left hand drifted toward the crash cart. The defibrillator paddles sat in their cradle cords coiled like restraints. She had seen nurses use them 1,000 times, calm and clinical. In her hand, they suddenly looked like something else. Heavy. Solid. A blunt argument. Evelyn whispered almost to herself they would not be so stupid. Riley watched the door handle. Stupid is not the word. The door did not swing open gently. It jolted inward, as if kicked by someone who knew exactly how much force the hinges could take without breaking. The small window shook. The red emergency lighting washed into the hall and brought the shapes into clarity. 3 men came through. They wore suits the way soldiers wore uniforms. Clean lines, no wasted fabric jackets cut to conceal what they carried. They moved as a unit 1 step apart, shoulders angled to cover each other's blind spots. Their eyes did not scan the room like startled civilians. They cleared it like a room they had cleared before. The lead man's hand came up with a pistol so smoothly it felt practiced, not impulsive. The muzzle found Tyler's chest as if it had been drawn there by a magnet. Tessa let out a sound that was half scream and half breath. Evelyn moved without thinking, throwing her body over her son. Her arms braced across him, chin tucked, as if she could shield him from bullets by sheer will. Riley's body locked for 1 heartbeat. Glass door memory flashed across her mind. Luke behind the barrier. Her hands useless at her sides, a voice telling her to stay out of the way. The second heartbeat broke the paralysis. Riley slammed her palm down on the code blue wall button. The alarm shrieked instantly, a hard electronic howl that stabbed through the building. Lights on the panel flared. Somewhere beyond the trauma bay doors would start locking. Cameras would turn, radios would crackle, and people would move, because hospitals treated alarms like incoming fire. The lead gunman's eyes snapped toward Riley just for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough. Riley grabbed the defibrillator paddles off the cradle. The cords jerked taut. She held them up chest-high stance, widening the way Agent Reyes had shown her in the hospital garage after hours, when she had taught Riley how to keep her balance if someone rushed her. "Back away," Riley said. The words came out low, controlled. Not pleading, not screaming, command voice. The man with the pistol did not flinch. His mouth curled as if the scene amused him. "You're brave," he said, "or reckless." Riley kept the paddles steady. "I'm on shift." One of the men behind him moved toward the wall, angling for the crash cart and the oxygen lines. The third stayed near the door, watching the hall behind them, covering the exit. Their pattern was clean. Tessa slid behind the crash cart and popped a drawer open. Her hands moved fast. She pulled a syringe, snapped a vial, drew fluid with the speed of someone who had given 1,000 injections without shaking. She rose into view beside Riley's syringe held like a knife. "Take 1 more step," Tessa said, voice tight, "and I'll put you on the floor." The lead man laughed quietly. "Nurse thinks she's a soldier." Tessa's eyes did not blink. "I've been through worse than you." The lead man's gaze returned to Riley. Now he studied her properly. He looked at her badge, then at her face. "Dr. Riley Harper," he said. Hearing her name from his mouth made the hair on her arms lift. He knew who she was. Not from the moment, from a file. Riley's grip tightened on the paddles. "Who are you?" The gunman did not answer the question. He stepped slightly to the side so the pistol stayed trained on Tyler, even with Evelyn covering him. "Move away from the patient," he said. Riley's voice stayed steady. "You're in a trauma bay. Put the gun down." The second man by the wall flicked his eyes to the monitor, then to Tyler's tubing. His hand hovered near the ventilator controls, measuring how quickly he could kill without firing. Riley saw it and shifted, blocking his line of access. "No one touches those lines," she said. The second man paused, eyes cold. "You can't stop this." Riley's mouth went dry. Watch me. Tyler made a sound under Evelyn's arm. A strained breath. His fingers twitched as if trying to lift. Riley leaned toward him just enough to catch his words. They said, Tyler whispered, "If I wake up." Evelyn's head lifted. Her eyes snapped to the gun, then to the men, then to Riley. Riley spoke to Evelyn without taking her eyes off the lead man. "Ma'am, stay low." Evelyn did not move. "I am not leaving my son." Riley felt a sharp flare of respect she did not have time to name. The lead man's eyes narrowed. "Your alarm won't save him." Riley heard distant doors slamming somewhere in the corridor. Footsteps. Radio chatter. The building responding. But the men in front of her did not look rushed. They looked like they had timed the window. Riley's mind raced through the pieces of the night like she was assembling a rifle in the dark. The blackout. The vial. Maddox's relief. The way the perimeter had shifted. The way someone had been watching her more than the patient. The way the call button had failed. This was not just an attack. It was a breach. Tyler, Riley said, voice calm. "Listen to me. Can you tell me who did this?" Tyler's eyes flicked glassy but urgent. His lips moved. The lead gunman leaned in slightly, pistol tracking Tyler's sternum with a predator's patience. Tyler forced air through his throat, and the words came out stronger than they should have, as if anger had pushed them through the fog. "I recorded everything." The room stilled. Even the man by the ventilator froze. Tyler's voice shook, but it carried. "Every conversation, every document. It's already uploaded." The lead gunman's expression changed, almost imperceptibly. A flicker of calculation. He glanced to one of his partners. Tyler swallowed again and kept going, forcing the sentences out. 3 servers, different countries, a dead man switch. If I die, it goes public." Evelyn's breath caught. She stared at her son like she had never seen him before, like she was seeing the man inside the boy. The lead gunman's jaw tightened. Riley did not let herself relax. She had seen men like this before, men trained to improvise with cold efficiency. A threat did not stop them. It just changed the method. The lead gunman's eyes narrowed. "You don't have the nerve." Tyler's lips pulled into a weak, grim line. "Try me." The second man shifted his weight, thinking. The third by the door glanced out into the corridor, listening to the growing movement. Riley used the pause. She spoke in a flat, clinical voice, the way she spoke when she had to force people to acknowledge reality. "You're not walking out of here," she said. "The hospital is on lockdown. Cameras are running on backup. Security is coming." The lead gunman smiled without humor. "Security is slow." He kept the gun on Tyler and tilted his head toward Riley. "You are the problem." Riley felt that sentence land in her bones, not because it scared her, because it confirmed something she had already felt. They had not expected her to step in. They had not expected her to see. The gunman took one step forward. Riley raised the paddles slightly, stance widening, heart steadying into a hard calm. The gunman's voice dropped, intimate and ugly. "You should have stayed in your lane." Riley's throat tightened, but she did not blink. That's what Maddox said. At the sound of Maddox's name, the lead gunman's eyes flicked quick as a trigger pull. It was almost nothing. Almost. Tyler's gaze locked on the gunman. Cole Tyler rasped. The name hit the room like a thrown knife. Evelyn went still, her face drained of color. Cole. Riley's eyes narrowed. She looked at the man again, really looked. Something in the shape of his cheekbones, the set of his mouth. A resemblance that did not belong in a threat. The gunman did not lower his weapon, but his expression hardened into something personal. Tyler forced the words out, voice thin and shaking. "Agent Cole Whitman." Riley's stomach dropped. The man's last name matched Evelyn's, matched Tyler's. Evelyn's voice came out as a whisper that sounded like prayer and betrayal at once. "Your family." Cole Whitman's eyes did not soften, "Ma'am." The formality was a blade. Tyler's breath hitched. "You were supposed to protect me." Cole's jaw flexed. "I was protecting the country." Tyler shook his head weakly. "No, you were protecting Nolan Price." At the name, Cole's eyes flashed. The second man by the ventilator shifted gaze, snapping toward Cole for confirmation. The third man by the door stiffened, listening harder to the hallway. Riley's mind locked onto the name like a target. Vice President Nolan Price. Evelyn's fingers crushed Tyler's hand. Cole put the gun down. Cole's voice stayed calm. This is bigger than him. Riley's voice cut in sharp. It's a child on a stretcher. Cole's gaze flicked to Riley. Cold, assessing. And you are a resident who decided to become a hero. Riley felt Tessa shift beside her syringe, still raised. Tessa's voice was low. You shoot in here, you don't just kill him. You turn the whole floor into a stampede. Cole did not look at Tessa. Then don't make me shoot. Riley felt the building around them like a living thing. The alarm still blared. The air vibrated with it. Somewhere nearby, doors banged. Voices shouted. Footsteps pounded closer, faster now. The men in suits heard it too. The third at the door glanced back into the corridor, eyes narrowing. He murmured something Riley could not catch. Cole kept his gun steady. Tyler, you don't understand what you found. Tyler's eyes were bright with fever and fury. I found bodies. Riley's skin went cold. Luke's face flashed through her mind. The puncture mark. The autopsy report. The word overdose written like a stamp. Cole's eyes narrowed. You found paperwork. Tyler's voice rose with effort. I found a pipeline, shell vendors, procurement fraud, medical supplies sold to the government at triple cost, kickbacks routed through hospitals. Riley's breath caught. Procurement, hospitals. The same dirty language Agent Reyes had used. The same kind of fraud Luke would have chased. Cole's jaw tightened. You weren't supposed to connect it. Tyler's voice came out in a rasp that sounded like it hurt. I did, and I recorded you. Cole's expression did not change much, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. You don't have proof, Cole said. Tyler's mouth twitched. I have your voice. I have the email chain. I have the payments. 2 years. The second man by the ventilator looked at Cole, eyes sharp. 2 years. Cole did not look away from Tyler. Stay focused. Riley heard a new sound outside the door, closer now. A radio crackle, a shouted command. Metal hitting metal. Evelyn spoke, voice low and dangerous. Cole, you're pointing a gun at my son. Cole's eyes did not flinch. I am preventing a national collapse. Evelyn's lips pulled back, not quite a snarl, not quite a smile. You are preventing your paycheck from drying up. For the first time, Cole's calm cracked. Just a slight tightening around his eyes. Anger, embarrassment. Something human. Riley saw the opening and stepped into it. You came in during a power dip, Riley said, voice steady. You brought a team. You knew the layout. You timed this. Cole's eyes flicked to her. You talk too much. Riley lifted the paddles slightly cord taut. You talk like you've done this before. Cole's voice dropped. Maddox was supposed to handle it. The name fell into the room like poison. Tessa's head snapped toward Riley, eyes wide above her mask. Riley's heart kicked hard. Cole continued almost casually, as if he were explaining a logistics failure. The attending was supposed to let him die quietly. Overdose, tragic, clean. Riley's mouth went dry. So you could bury it. Cole's gaze stayed cold. So we could prevent chaos. Riley felt rage rise in her chest, hot and focused. Luke's death stopped being a memory and became a weapon. She stepped forward, 1-inch paddles, raised voice low. You killed my brother the same way she said. Cole stared at her like she was an inconvenience that had learned to speak. Your brother was collateral. The word collateral made Riley's vision sharpen. She could hear her own breathing. She could feel the weight of the paddles in her hands. She could feel the cords pulling like restraints. Tessa's voice shook with controlled fury. Say that again. Cole's eyes stayed on Tyler. This ends here. His pistol lifted a fraction, tightening aim. Evelyn moved faster than Riley expected, shoving herself lower over Tyler, head down, shoulder braced. No. Riley's body moved on instinct. She stepped laterally, shifting the angle, forcing Cole to adjust if he wanted a clear shot. Tessa mirrored, her syringe raised, feet planted. The second man, by the ventilator, took a step toward the lines again. Riley snapped, "Touch that and you die." The man hesitated, eyes flicking to Cole for permission. Cole's voice stayed calm. "Do it." The man's hand reached. Riley did not think. She slammed the paddles together. A bright electrical arc cracked in the red light, a sharp snapping sound like a whip. The light flash reflected off the gun barrel, off the glass shards on the floor, off the sweat on Tessa's forehead. The second man flinched hard, reflexively jerking his hand back. Cole's aim twitched for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough for the door behind them to explode with sound. Not an explosion, a violent entry. The trauma bay door slammed inward, and the corridor filled with real bodies moving fast. Secret Service weapons up. Hospital security with vests and batons. Someone shouted, "Drop it." Cole's team reacted instantly, pivoting, shifting to cover, but the room was already tightening around them. The perimeter had flipped. Cole did not drop the gun. His eyes flicked to Tyler, then to Evelyn, then to Riley. A man calculating his last options. Tyler's voice cut through the noise, thin but fierce. "If I die, it all goes public." Cole's jaw clenched. He raised the pistol again, a final hard decision forming in his posture. Riley's heart hammered once and then steadied into a cold clarity. She lifted the paddles again and slammed them together a second time. The arc snapped bright. Cole's eyes blinked involuntarily. His aim jerked. A gunshot cracked deafening in the small room. The bullet punched into the ceiling tile, showering dust and insulation. Before Cole could correct, two agents hit him like a tackle on concrete. They drove him down, shoulder into chest, twisting the gun hand. The pistol skittered across the floor metal, clattering against tile. Tessa moved first, kicking it away with her shoe, then backing up, syringe still raised, breathing hard. Cole fought silently for a second. Not panicked, just trained. Then his shoulders sagged as cuffs snapped, closed on his wrists. The second and third men went down under a wave of bodies, arms pinned, faces pressed to tile. The room filled with shouted commands, radios, the hard sound of restraint. Evelyn stayed over Tyler until she heard the cuffs click. Then she lifted her head hair disheveled for the first time, eyes blazing with tears and fury. She pressed her forehead to Tyler's for a moment, her voice breaking. "Stay with me." Tyler's eyes were open, unfocused, but he was breathing. The ventilator hissed. The monitor beeped with a rhythm that held. Riley's hands shook as the adrenaline drained, but she forced them steady and leaned in to check the lines. She felt her gloves stick slightly to the tubing with sweat. Tessa's voice came out rough. "Pulse is holding." Riley nodded once. "Keep him ventilated. Keep him stable." A senior Secret Service agent stepped toward Evelyn, voice clipped. "Ma'am, we need you outside." Evelyn turned on him, eyes sharp enough to cut. "You let him in." The agent's face tightened. "We did not." Evelyn's gaze flicked to Cole on the floor, cuffed jaw, clenched eyes still cold. "Then find out who did." The agent nodded once, then his gaze moved to Riley, studying her like he was recalibrating a threat assessment. "You," he said. Riley did not look up from Tyler. "Doctor?" The agent's voice softened by a fraction professional. "You initiated lockdown." Riley kept her focus on the patient. It was a breach. The agent nodded again. "Correct." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Are you hurt?" Riley shook her head. "No." The agent's gaze flicked to the broken vial on the floor, then back to Riley. "That stays secured." Riley's jaw tightened. "It already is." Tessa moved to stand between the vial and the cluster of agents, her posture a silent warning. Cole was hauled to his knees by two agents. His suit was smeared with dust. He turned his head and looked at Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said, voice flat. Evelyn stared at him. "You chose him." Cole's mouth tightened. "I chose the mission." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, voice low. "You chose money." Cole did not answer. He looked at Riley, instead expression cold with something like contempt. "You're not built for this," Cole said. Riley met his gaze for the first time fully, the paddles still in her hands, cords hanging. Her voice was quiet. "You came into my trauma bay with a gun," she said. You're the one who doesn't belong here. Cole's eyes narrowed, then he was dragged toward the door boots, scraping radios, crackling agents, shouting for corridors to clear. As the room emptied, the alarm still blared in the background, but it began to feel distant, like the sound belonged to another building. Riley set the paddles back into the cradle. Her fingers trembled as she did it. Tessa exhaled hard. That was not security. Riley kept her eyes on Tyler's monitor, watching the rhythm hold. No. Evelyn stepped toward Riley close enough that Riley could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes. Lines that told stories cameras never caught. Evelyn's voice was low. You saw the injection mark. Yes. You challenged the attending. Yes. Evelyn's gaze was sharp. You saved my son. Riley did not accept the praise. Not yet. She stayed anchored to the work, to the tangible reality of lines and lungs and blood pressure. He's alive, Riley said. That is all that matters. Evelyn's jaw tightened. It is not all that matters. Riley looked up then, meeting Evelyn's eyes. It should be. Evelyn held her gaze for a long moment, then turned back to Tyler. Her hand stroked his hair again, gentler this time, trembling slightly. Tessa started cleaning blood and resetting equipment with the grim efficiency of someone who knew the fight was not over just because the gun was gone. She glanced at Riley, eyes tired but fierce. Riley leaned toward Tyler. Stay with us. Tyler blinked slowly. His voice was barely a rasp. I did. Riley heard footsteps again outside the bay, heavier now, more chaotic, like the building was filling with people who had been called to the scene. The door window showed a shifting crowd of silhouettes. Riley adjusted Tyler's IV flow and checked the ventilator settings, forcing her hands to remain steady while her mind kept tally of what had just happened. A breach team had entered a hospital. A Secret Service agent had pointed a gun at the First Lady's son. The name Nolan Price had been spoken like a code word that unlocked violence. Maddox had been named as part of the plan. Riley looked at the broken glass on the floor, the dark liquid still spreading in a slow stain. Tessa followed her gaze. We need that bagged and sealed. Riley nodded. We do. Evelyn's voice cut in, controlled again. You will have it sealed, and you will not speak to anyone outside this room without authorization. Riley's head turned. Ma'am, this is a crime scene. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. This is my son. Riley did not back away. This is also my hospital, and I have already seen what happens when people control the story instead of the evidence. Evelyn studied Riley with a quiet intensity, then gave a small nod that was not agreement, but acknowledgement. Then you will speak to the FBI, Evelyn said. Not the press, not the hospital board. The FBI. Riley's chest tightened. They are already involved. Evelyn's gaze flicked toward the corridor. They will be. Riley returned her focus to Tyler, watching the monitor, listening to the steady hiss of the ventilator. His pulse held. His oxygen saturation inched upward. Tessa moved close and spoke low. You did good. Riley's voice came out rough. I did what I could. Tessa's eyes softened for a second. That is what matters. Riley did not respond. She could still feel the weight of the paddles in her hands. She could still hear the crack of the arc. She could still see Cole's eyes when he said collateral. Her throat tightened as Luke's name rose again in her mind, not as a memory behind glass, but as a wound that had just been opened. In the hallway, the sound of boots and radios swelled. Inside the bay, Tyler's monitor kept beeping, stubborn and alive, while Riley stood at the head of the bed and watched the perimeter form again, this time, not around a patient, but around the truth. The corridor outside Trauma Bay 3 filled so quickly that the air itself seemed to change. Radios chirped. Boots struck tile in fast measured beats. A wall of dark suits and badges formed, then tightened, turning the hallway into a controlled choke point. Someone shut the double doors at the far end. Someone else posted a guard by the stairwell. Riley watched it all through the small window in the Trauma Bay door, the way you watched a perimeter being established on a map. Inside, the beeping held. Tyler's chest rose with the ventilator's hiss. The oxygen saturation inched up a single point at a time, grudging and slow. Tessa moved at the bedside with the fierce calm of someone who refused to let her hands betray what her nerves were feeling. She checked lines tightened tape-wiped blood from a knuckle, then shifted her body so she could see the door and the patient in the same glance. She was guarding him like he was her own. Riley crouched near the broken glass on the floor without touching it. The dark liquid had spread into an uneven stain thick enough to cling to tile. Even under red emergency lighting, it looked wrong. She turned her head slightly toward the nearest agent inside the bay, keeping her voice low. Nobody steps in it. Nobody picks it up. We bag it with clean tools. Chain of custody. The agent's eyes flicked over her badge, then to her face. He nodded once, a small acknowledgement that she was speaking the language of evidence, not ego. Evelyn stood near Tyler's shoulder posture, rigid eyes moving between her son and the door window. She had stopped crying. Tears had left tracks, but her face was composed again, as if she had put the grief back behind glass. She held Tyler's hand with 2 fingers, careful of the IV, careful of the pulse oximeter clip, careful of anything that might pull him away from stability. The trauma bay door opened a fraction, and a senior Secret Service agent leaned in, then stepped fully inside. His expression was tight with the strain of command. He spoke to Evelyn, first voice controlled. "Ma'am, we need to relocate you. Secure holding area." Evelyn did not move. "My son is not leaving this room." "We are not moving him," the agent said. "We are moving you." Evelyn's gaze sharpened. "Your detail included my nephew. Your detail included a gun pointed at my child. Do not touch me." The agent held her stare, then shifted his attention to Riley. "Doctor, you need to provide a statement." Riley's eyes stayed on Tyler's monitor. "You can take it while I work." The agent's jaw tightened. "We need you outside." Riley met his eyes briefly. "If his rhythm collapses, your questions will not matter." The agent hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, here." He lifted a small recorder, holding it in his palm like it weighed nothing. Riley spoke in short, clean sentences the way she gave handoff reports in the ICU. Patient arrived at 2:47. Male, approximately 16. Respiratory failure followed by cardiac arrest. Pinpoint pupils. Puncture mark on right lateral neck with surrounding tissue discoloration. Responded to naloxone. Suspected injection with opioid plus secondary agent. Blackout occurred during resuscitation. Glass vial shattered. Dark liquid spilled. Not from crash cart. 3 armed individuals breached the bay. Lead identified by patient as Agent Cole Whitman. Firearm discharged once into ceiling. Subjects detained. The agent nodded as he recorded, then glanced at the vial stain on the floor. The attending. Riley's mouth went dry. Dr. Maddox was removed before the breach. Evelyn's voice cut in sharp. Removed and still involved. The agent did not answer that. He stepped back toward the door, then paused. Federal agents are en route. Riley's skin prickled. She looked at the door window again and saw men in suits moving with a different authority than the Secret Service. Their pace was calm. Their eyes were hard. They did not rush because they did not need to. A woman stepped into view, and the hallway lights caught her face, dark hair pulled back tight. A badge flashed briefly at her waist. She spoke to someone out of frame, then turned her head and her gaze landed on the trauma bay window. Riley felt the moment like a pressure change. The door opened. The woman walked in without hesitation, ignoring the blood, the smell, the red emergency lighting that made everything look like a warning. She took in Tyler on the bed, Evelyn at his side, Tessa guarding the crash cart, Riley near the head of the bed. "Dr. Riley Harper," she said, voice low and direct. Riley did not ask how she knew. She had learned that people who walked like this did not get their information by guessing. Yes, the woman held up her credentials. Special Agent Marisol Reyes, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. FBI. Reyes did not flinch at the First Lady's tone. "Ma'am." Reyes's gaze shifted to Tyler, then back to Riley. "You identified an injection site. You ordered an expanded talk screen. I did, Riley said. Rhea's eyes moved to the broken vial stain. And you secured that. Riley nodded. Reyes stepped closer, lowering her voice so it stayed inside the bay. You did the right things in the right order. The words landed differently than praise from TV anchors or hospital administrators. They landed like confirmation, like Reyes had been waiting to see if Riley would do exactly this. Tessa's eyes flicked between Riley and Reyes, suspicion and relief mixing. Reyes looked at Evelyn. Ma'am, I need you to step outside for a private conversation. Evelyn's mouth tightened. You can talk here. Reyes' voice stayed calm, not with Tyler awake enough to hear it. Evelyn hesitated, then glanced down at her son. Tyler's eyes were half open, unfocused, but he was listening. Riley saw it in the way his jaw tightened slightly when voices sharpened. Evelyn brushed Tyler's hair once, then straightened. I will not be far. Reyes nodded and gestured toward the door. Secret Service moved immediately to form a corridor. Evelyn stepped out with them, leaving the trauma bay feeling colder. Reyes turned back to Riley. Her eyes were sharp, but not unkind. You have personal history with an overdose death, Reyes said. Riley's throat tightened. My brother. Reyes nodded once as if confirming a detail in a file. Luke Harper. Declared accidental overdose. Same hospital, same bay. Tessa's breath caught. How do you know that? Reyes did not look at Tessa, because it was not accidental. Riley felt the room tilt just slightly. The monitor beeped. The ventilator hissed. The sounds anchored her in the present, while Reyes's words tried to pull her into the past. Riley kept her voice steady. What are you saying? Reyes took a thin folder from under her arm and opened it without flourish. Photos slid into view, protected in plastic. A close-up of a puncture mark on a neck. Gray tissue around it. The same ugly ring. Luke's neck captured by a camera that had not cared about dignity. Riley's stomach clenched so hard it hurt. Reyes watched her face carefully. Your brother discovered irregularities in medical procurement. Shell vendors. Safety audits forged. Equipment routed through hospitals at inflated cost. He documented payments, names, signatures. Riley's fingers went numb. He never told me. Reyes's voice stayed quiet. He told the wrong people. Tessa's voice came out rough. You are saying someone killed him. Reyes nodded once, yes. Riley's gaze lifted, and the question that had been rotting in her for 3 years pushed out of her throat. Who? Reyes did not answer immediately. She glanced towards the door, then towards the stain on the floor, then back to Riley. Tonight, Reyes said you created evidence we did not have. Riley swallowed. Who? Reyes's eyes hardened. Dr. Grant Maddox. Riley felt a cold rush behind her ribs. Her mind flashed to Maddox's relief in the blackout, to his flat refusal to run talks, to the way he had looked at the door like he was waiting for something, to Cole saying Maddox was supposed to handle it. Riley's voice came out tight. He murdered my brother. Reyes nodded. We believe so, and not only him. Tessa's hand gripped the crash cart edge hard enough to whiten her knuckles. How many? Reyes's jaw tightened. At least 7 connected to the procurement network. We were building a case, but we needed a bridge that would hold in court. Tonight you gave us that bridge. Riley stared at Tyler's face, then back at Reyes. Why teach me self-defense? Reyes's gaze did not waver. Because you are a Harper. Because your brother did not die quietly. Because you were always going to pull on this thread. Riley's mouth went dry. The memory returned of Reyes in the hospital garage weeks ago, showing Riley how to plant her feet, how to keep her center, how to move without panic. Riley had thought it was paranoia, a precaution, a strange kindness from a federal agent who had asked a few questions about Luke and then disappeared again. Now it felt like a warning delivered early. Riley forced herself to breathe. Tyler. Reyes nodded. His discovery overlapped with your brother's. Different entry point, same network. Political money meets medical contracts. People who profit from it do not tolerate loose ends. Riley looked down at Tyler alive and breathing only because she had refused to step aside. The thought struck her with sick clarity. If she had obeyed, Tyler would be dead, and the story would be packaged as tragedy, clean and disposable. Tessa's voice shook. What happens now? Reyes' eyes shifted toward the door. Now we separate truth from noise. We secure the evidence. We secure the witnesses. Riley felt her heartbeat slow into something hard. I will testify. Reyes nodded once. Then you understand what that makes you. Riley did not hesitate. A target. Reyes's gaze held hers, yes. Outside the bay, the hallway roared with movement. Agents in suits carried evidence bags and cameras. Hospital administrators tried to insert themselves and were quietly pushed back. A news van arrived at the entrance, lights spilling into the rain, and someone on the staff leaked enough information that a reporter's voice echoed faintly from a television in the waiting room. Riley heard her name once distorted by distance. Resident doctor. Saved the president's son, hero. The word felt useless in her mouth. Heroes were in comic books. This was blood and poison and a needle mark that had followed her family like a curse. Reyes stepped closer to the stain on the floor. She spoke to Tessa. Do not let anyone touch that until my techs bag it. Tessa nodded. Nobody gets near it. Reyes's eyes moved to Riley again. You will come with us for a formal statement. Riley glanced at Tyler's monitor. I am not leaving him. Reyes did not argue. Then we take it here. Reyes raised her hand, and two agents entered with gloves and a sterile bag, moving with the careful precision of people who knew evidence could evaporate with one careless breath. Riley watched as they photographed the stain, measured it, then used clean tools to lift shards and swab liquid. Every motion was slow, deliberate, disciplined. As they worked, Tyler's eyes drifted open again. He turned his head slightly, looking for his mother. His gaze found Riley instead. You, he whispered. Riley leaned close. Stay still. Tyler's voice trembled. He was in the room. Riley kept her tone calm. Who? Tyler swallowed. Maddox. Riley felt her spine go rigid. She kept her face still so Tyler would not see the storm behind her eyes. What did he do? Tyler's lips pressed together, fighting fog. He told me to stop digging. He said it would ruin everything. Riley nodded slowly. Do you remember anything else? Tyler's eyes fluttered. Cole. He said Cole would take care of it. Riley's throat tightened. She glanced up and met Reyes's eyes. Reyes had heard every word. Reyes gave a small nod, as if a lock had just clicked into place. Hours later, when the gray light of dawn finally pushed into the hospital through rain-streaked windows, Riley sat in the cafeteria staring at a paper cup of coffee she could not drink. The smell rose bitter and familiar, but her stomach rejected it. Her hands trembled when she tried to hold the cup. She set it down and folded her fingers together to hide the shake. Tessa slid into the chair across from her, hair pulled back again, face pale with exhaustion. She looked older than she had at 2:47, as if the night had demanded years. They are everywhere, Tessa said quietly. Riley did not need to ask who. She could see them through the cafeteria window. Men and women in suits. A pair of Secret Service agents posted at a corner. FBI techs moving equipment cases. Police holding back hospital staff who wanted to stare. They said your name on the news, Tessa added. Riley's mouth tightened. I did not ask for that. Tessa's voice softened. You did not ask for any of this. Riley stared at the coffee. Luke's face kept appearing in the surface reflection, then disappearing when the liquid shifted. Reyes appeared at the cafeteria entrance like a shadow that belonged there. She moved through tables and tired nurses without hesitation, then sat across from Riley beside Tessa. You are coming with me, Reyes said, now. Riley's jaw tightened. Tyler. Stable, Reyes replied, in a secure room, guarded by people who were not on Cole's payroll. Riley flinched slightly at the phrase. Reyes leaned forward, lowering her voice. Maddox is in custody, Reyes said. Riley's pulse kicked, charged. Reyes nodded. Conspiracy, attempted murder, evidence tampering. He is talking, but he is not telling the full truth. Riley's throat tightened. He will try to shape the story. Reyes's eyes held hers. He will try to survive. Riley stood. Her legs felt heavy, but her spine felt straight. Reyes guided her through a back corridor away from cameras, away from staff, away from the main entrance where reporters had gathered like scavengers. Riley caught glimpses of her hospital through new eyes. Doors sealed with tape. Guards at stairwells. Nurses whispering behind masks. The building felt less like a place of healing and more like a fortified position holding a line. In a private consultation room, Reyes recorded Riley's statement again, slower this time, deeper into detail. Riley described the puncture mark, the tissue necrosis, the smell of the spilled vial. Maddox's refusal to authorize talks, the blackout and shattered glass. Cole's entry. Cole naming Maddox as part of the plan, Tyler. Identifying Cole, Tyler confirming Maddox had spoken to him directly. Reyes listened without interrupting. When Riley finished, Reyes slid a paper across the table. Witness protection protocols, Reyes said. Riley stared at the page. Her name printed cleanly. Dr. Riley Harper. Like a label on a file. You said you understood, Reyes added. Now you sign. Riley lifted the pen. Her fingers trembled. She signed anyway. The protection started immediately. 2 agents posted outside her apartment. Another blended into the hospital as staff. Metal detectors appeared at entrances. Bags were searched. Every elevator ride carried a new face with an earpiece. Riley kept working. She kept her head down. She kept her hand steady on patients who had no idea they were being treated by a resident under federal guard. For 2 days, Maddox remained in custody. For 2 days, the hospital breathed in a shallow, controlled way, waiting for the next hit. On the 3rd day, Reyes found Riley in the hall outside Tyler's secure room. Tyler was more awake now, speaking in short bursts, face still pale, but eyes clear. Maddox posted bond, Reyes said quietly. Riley's skin went cold. How? Reyes's jaw tightened. Money moves fast when it wants to. Riley glanced at the guards outside Tyler's room. Where is he? Reyes' voice stayed flat. He disappeared within hours. Riley felt the edges of the corridor sharpen, every shadow turning into possibility. She tried to keep her breathing steady, but fear pushed at her ribs. Reyes watched her closely. You do not leave your perimeter. Riley's mouth tightened. This hospital is his perimeter. Reyes did not argue. That night, the West Wing filled with smoke. The first alarm sounded soft, almost polite, then rose into a scream that echoed through the building. Sprinklers hissed somewhere distant. Staff began moving patients in controlled panic wheelchairs and gurneys lining the corridors like an evacuation route in a war zone. Riley was at a nurse's station when Tessa grabbed her arm hard enough to hurt. Tyler is moving, Tessa said. Riley ran with her feet pounding tile, the smell of smoke growing stronger with every step. She reached Tyler's secure room and saw him sitting up slightly, eyes wide, oxygen tubing in place. What is happening? Tyler whispered. Fire, Riley said, already checking the monitor, already scanning the lines. We are relocating you. Evelyn was there, face pale but controlled, coat thrown over her shoulders. She looked at Riley, then at Reyes, who had appeared in the doorway with agents behind her. This is him? Evelyn said quietly. Reyes's gaze was hard. It may be. They moved Tyler into a wheelchair because it was faster through smoke-filled corridors than dragging a bed. Tessa pushed. Riley walked beside him, one hand on the chair handle, the other hovering near the oxygen tank. Agents formed a moving wall around them. Weapons concealed but hands ready. Smoke rolled down the hall in a slow, dirty wave. People coughed. Firefighters shouted orders below. The overhead lights flickered again, shadows stretching long and warped across the walls. Riley heard a sound ahead that did not belong to evacuation. A calm footstep. One set. Not running, not rushing. Walking. Riley's heart tightened. She looked up. At the far end of the corridor, backlit by orange glow and drifting smoke, a figure stood still. Dr. Grant Maddox. His white coat was gone. He wore dark clothes that blended into the haze. His face looked pale, almost calm, like a man who had already accepted his end. In his right hand he held a syringe that caught the emergency light and gleamed. Not a gun, a needle. The same kind of instrument that had destroyed Riley's brother without leaving a bullet hole. Maddox lifted his head slightly, eyes locking on Riley through the smoke. "Dr. Harper," he called, voice carrying with eerie clarity. "We need to talk." Tessa's hands tightened on the wheelchair. Tyler's eyes widened. Evelyn's breath caught sharp. Reyes stepped forward, hand moving toward her weapon. "Drop it, Maddox." Maddox smiled thin and bitter. "You all look so serious." Riley's mouth went dry. The hallway felt too narrow, the smoke too thick, the distance too long. "Maddox," Riley said, voice steady. "Stay where you are." Maddox took one slow step forward. "You look like him," he said. "Your brother had that same stubborn shine. The belief that truth matters." Riley's stomach clenched. "You killed him." Maddox's eyes did not blink. He made himself a problem. Smoke thickened around him, turning him into a silhouette with a syringe like a dagger. Reyes's voice snapped. "Move Tyler, now." Tessa pushed the wheelchair backward toward the stairwell. Agents shifted with them, forming a moving shield. Evelyn stayed close, hand on Tyler's shoulder. Eyes locked on Maddox with fury that looked like it could set him on fire faster than the West Wing. Riley did not move with them. She stayed in the corridor, feet planted, blocking Maddox's line toward the retreating group. Tessa's voice cracked. "Riley." Riley did not look back. Her eyes stayed on Maddox. Maddox's voice softened, almost conversational. "They will be safe. For the moment." Riley's fingers slid to the crash cart parked near the wall, abandoned in the chaos. Drawers half open. Tools exposed. A scalpel in a sterile pack. Clamps, syringes, medication vials that looked suddenly like weapons. Maddox took another step. "You signed your name to a statement. You think paper protects you." Riley's hand found the scalpel pack. She tore it open with a precise motion that surprised even her. The blade settled into her palm, hidden by her fingers. "You posted bond," Riley said, buying time, keeping his eyes on her face, not her hand. "You knew they would be watching." Maddox laughed quietly. "I am already dead. The people who paid me do not forgive failure." He lifted the syringe slightly. "But I can still balance the scale." Riley felt the cold clarity of a trauma bay settle over her. The same clarity she used when blood sprayed, when airways collapsed, when seconds decided everything. She lowered her voice. "You think killing me fixes your mistake." Maddox's eyes narrowed. "It sends a message." Riley's pulse hammered once, then steadied. Smoke burned her throat. Her eyes watered. She forced them open wider, refusing to blink. Maddox lunged. The movement was fast, sudden, like a striking animal. The syringe arced toward Riley's neck. Riley dropped low and shifted sideways, feet sliding on tile. Body moving on the stance Reyes had taught her, the stance that kept her center under her. The needle missed her throat by inches. She felt the air cut. Her scalpel flashed. She sliced across Maddox's wrist with a controlled motion, not deep enough to sever, deep enough to make him drop what he held. Maddox screamed a sharp, raw sound swallowed by smoke. The syringe clattered to the floor. Clear liquid spilled across tile. Riley kicked it away hard, sending it skidding under a bench. Maddox staggered back, clutching his bleeding wrist, eyes wide with shock that looked almost childish. "You," he rasped. Riley stood blade still in her palm, breathing hard. "You underestimated me." Maddox's face twisted. "You think you are different." Riley's voice came out steady, cold. "I am not alone." Footsteps thundered from the stairwell. Agents flooded into the corridor, weapons raised. Firefighters followed behind them, shouting evacuation commands, dragging hoses through smoke. Maddox's eyes flicked once toward the spilled poison, then back to Riley. His mouth pulled into a smile that held no joy. "You have no idea how deep it goes," he whispered. Two agents slammed him into the wall and cuffed him, ignoring his bleeding wrist. He fought for a second, then sagged the fight, draining out as if the building itself had finally finished with him. Riley stood in the smoke scalpel still in her hand, shaking so hard her teeth clicked. The adrenaline crash hit like a wave. Her vision narrowed, then widened again as firefighters pushed past, shouting, moving, battling the blaze. Tessa appeared through the haze and grabbed Riley, pulling her into a fierce grip that made Riley's knees threaten to buckle. "Breathe," Tessa said, voice rough. "Just breathe." Riley inhaled smoke and coughed, then forced air again, eyes burning. She looked down at her hand and saw blood, not all of it hers. The scalpel blade glinted, then disappeared as an agent gently took it from her grasp. Reyes stepped into view, soot on her sleeve, eyes hard with relief she refused to show. "You did exactly what you were trained to do," Reyes said. Riley's voice came out thin. "He came back for me." Reyes nodded, yes. Behind them, Maddox was dragged toward the stairwell, head lifted, eyes still locked on Riley as if he wanted to carry her face with him into whatever cage waited. Riley watched until he vanished into smoke and bodies. Then she turned her head toward the stairwell where Tessa had pushed Tyler to safety, where Evelyn's silhouette stood rigid and protective, and where the hospital alarm still screamed like a warning that would not stop until every danger was accounted for. The smoke followed Riley down the stairwell like a living thing that refused to be left behind. It curled along the concrete walls, clinging to the railings, slipping into every breath. Firefighters pushed past in heavy gear boots, thudding voices clipped and urgent. "Keep moving, heads down." Riley kept one hand on the wall, the other gripping Tessa's sleeve so they would not lose each other in the crush. Her throat burned. Her eyes watered until the world blurred into streaks of red emergency lights and shadow. At the bottom landing, the air shifted. Cleaner, cooler. Someone had opened an exterior door to vent the stairwell. For a moment, Riley could taste rain again. Tessa turned Riley by the shoulders and forced her to look up. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyes wide and hard. "You still with me?" Riley coughed, nodded once, then again, when her voice failed. Reyes appeared beside them like she had been there the whole time, one hand pressed to her earpiece, the other signaling agents into position. Her suit jacket was gone. Smoke had dulled the crisp edges of her shirt. "Tyler is secure," Reyes said. "He is moving to an off-site location." Riley's chest tightened. "I need to check him." Reyes's gaze held steady. "His vitals are stable. He has a physician with him. You are not his only lifeline anymore." That should have been comforting. It was not. Riley's mind kept running the scene on repeat, searching for the mistake that could have killed him, the mistake that could have killed her. Evelyn stepped into the stairwell from the corridor flanked by agents. Her hair was pulled back now, no longer perfect. Soot smudged one cheek. She looked like a woman stripped of stage lights. She stopped in front of Riley. "You cut him," Evelyn said. Riley's hands trembled as she flexed her fingers. "He came at me with a syringe." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "He came at you because you refused to be quiet." Riley did not look away. "He came at me because he needed me to disappear." Evelyn's mouth tightened. "My son is alive." Riley nodded, yes. Evelyn's voice dropped. "You will not speak to the press." Riley stared at her. "I will speak to the FBI." Evelyn's gaze flicked to Reyes. Reyes did not blink. "She speaks to me." Evelyn held that stare for a long second, then her shoulders sagged by a fraction. The crack in her armor showed again, quick and small. "Good," Evelyn said. "Because I want every name." Reyes stepped closer. "You will get them. But you will do it without putting Tyler back in the crosshairs." Evelyn's jaw clenched. He is already in it. Riley watched Evelyn walk away, agents forming around her. She looked less like a political figure now and more like a commander who had just discovered her own unit had been compromised. Tessa exhaled a long breath and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "That man lit a wing on fire to get to you." Riley's throat tightened. He did not care who else got burned. Tessa's eyes hardened. He never did. Riley turned to Reyes. "Where is Maddox now?" Reyes' voice stayed flat. "In custody. No bail this time." Riley nodded once. The words should have been enough. They were not. Reyes guided Riley through a service corridor away from the main stairwell. The hospital felt hollowed out. Hallways were blocked by fire doors. Sprinklers dripped from ceiling tiles. Staff moved in clusters, whispering, eyes darting to badges. In a small conference room, Reyes sat Riley at a table and pushed a bottle of water toward her. Riley's hands shook when she twisted the cap. "Drink," Reyes said. Riley forced water down. It tasted like chlorine. A forensic tech entered with a small plastic bag and set it on the table. Inside was a swab and a vial fragment sealed in evidence tape. Reyes tapped the bag with one finger. The liquid from the shattered vial tested positive for a neuromuscular blocker. Hospital inventory does not carry it in that concentration. Riley's stomach tightened. So it was not epinephrine. Reyes's mouth pulled into something that was not quite a smile, no. Tessa stood near the door with her arms crossed, still in scrubs, still refusing to sit. She looked at the evidence bag like it was a snake. Reyes slid another paper across the table. Tyler's tox panel. Opioid present. The same class of paralytic present. Dose calibrated to stop breathing, then let the heart fail. Riley stared at the numbers, the lab codes, the cold language that turned murder into data. Reyes's voice softened slightly. "This is what you saw with your eyes." Riley swallowed. "Luke." Reyes held her gaze. "We pulled the archived samples from Luke's case. We found the same compound signature." Riley felt her chest constrict. For 3 years she had carried shame and anger like a weight, telling herself she should have seen something, done something. The truth did not lift the weight. It changed its shape. It turned it into heat. Tessa's voice came out rough. "You are saying he killed him?" Reyes nodded once. "Yes." And he used the same method because it worked. It looked like an overdose. It closed the file. Riley's fingers dug into her palm. Who else? Reyes opened a folder. Photographs of faces. Some in scrubs. Some in suits. Some smiling in graduation gowns. The kind of pictures families kept when they wanted to remember someone alive. Whistleblowers, Reyes said. Procurement officers. Compliance staff. A resident who complained about missing inventory. People who saw money moving where it should not. Riley stared at the faces. Her throat tightened until it hurt. Tessa shook her head slowly. All this because of contracts. Reyes's eyes stayed hard. Contracts are leverage. Leverage becomes control. Control becomes power. Riley lifted her gaze. And Maddox was the blade. Reyes nodded. He was paid to keep the blade sharp. A knock sounded at the door. An agent stepped in and murmured to Reyes. Reyes listened, then turned back to Riley. "Cole Whitman is in federal custody," Reyes said. "He is cooperating." Riley's mouth went dry. He tried to shoot Tyler. Reyes's voice stayed calm. He did not expect Tyler's deadman switch. He did not expect you. Riley leaned back, exhaustion hitting like a delayed shock. She had been awake too long. Her body felt heavy. Her mind felt too sharp. Reyes slid a form across the table. Protective detail. You have it already. Now it is official. Riley looked at the paper. Her name, her address. A list of rules that turn daily life into a controlled route. Tessa's voice lowered. "Riley." Riley picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. She signed anyway. Days blurred after that. The hospital reopened the west wing in sections, the smell of smoke lingering in the vents. Riley returned to work under watchful eyes. 2 agents stationed near the resident entrance. One near her car. Another blended into the cafeteria line, scanning faces while pretending to choose salad. Staff treated Riley differently. Some with awe. Some with resentment. Some with fear, as if proximity to her might draw danger like a magnet. Logan Pierce avoided her. Marin watched her with wide eyes like Riley had become a story. Riley did not talk about the night unless Reyes asked. When nurses asked, Riley kept it simple. Patient arrived. Patient treated, patient survived. The rest lived in evidence bags. Tyler recovered behind layers of security. When Riley was allowed to see him, it was in a private room with guards at the door and a metal detector in the hallway. Tyler looked smaller without the ventilator, smaller without the chaos, but his eyes were clear. He watched Riley walk in and gave a tired half-smile. "You stayed," Tyler said. Riley moved to his bedside and checked his vitals out of habit, fingers gentle on his wrist. "You are alive. That is the point." Tyler's gaze held hers. "I said your name on my recording." Riley's throat tightened. "I know." Tyler swallowed. "I told them Maddox spoke to me. I told them Cole said he would fix it." Riley nodded. "That matters." Tyler's voice lowered. "My mother is furious." Riley glanced at the door. "She should be." Tyler's eyes softened. "She also asked for you." Riley felt the tension in her shoulders shift. "For what?" Tyler hesitated. "She wants oversight. An independent review for suspicious deaths in hospitals. She wants your input because she trusts you." Riley stared at him for a moment. Trust felt like an unfamiliar object, heavy and fragile. "I am a resident," Riley said. Tyler's mouth twitched. "So was I a kid." That did not stop them. Riley exhaled slowly. "Rest." Tyler nodded and leaned back, eyes closing for a moment, like sleep had finally won. 6 weeks later, Richmond felt colder than Norfolk. The federal courthouse rose from the city like a fortress, concrete and glass and sharp angles. Barriers lined the sidewalk. Cameras clustered behind them. Reporters called out names that belonged to strangers, and then called Riley's name like it was a headline. Riley walked up the steps with Reyes at her side. Suit jacket buttoned tight, hands clenched to keep them steady. In her bag was Luke's graduation photo. She had taken it from her mother's mantle with careful fingers, the kind of careful you used when you knew you were borrowing grief. Reyes glanced at Riley's hands. "Breathe." Riley inhaled. Air felt thin. Inside, security was a ritual. Shoes off. Bag opened. Metal detector. Agents watching the watchers. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Tessa waited with the coffee she did not offer. Her face was set, eyes fierce. "You look like you have not slept," Tessa said. Riley's mouth tightened. "I have slept." Tessa snorted softly. "Your body did. Your mind did not." Riley did not argue. The courtroom doors opened, and the room swallowed them. Tyler sat in the front row, still pale suit slightly loose on his frame. Evelyn sat beside him. Posture, rigid hands folded. Her eyes flicked to Riley as she entered. No smile, no softness, a nod that felt like an oath. At the defense table, Grant Maddox sat in a suit that did not fit him the way his white coat had. He looked smaller without the hospital behind him. His hair was neater. His face was calmer. His eyes were the same, cold calculation, as if he were still counting how many moves remained. Riley took her seat beside Reyes and stared at the wood grain of the bench until the judge entered and everyone rose. The trial moved like a machine. Evidence presented in clean language. Photographs, lab results, security footage from corridors, audio from Tyler's recordings. When they played Cole Whitman's voice describing the plan, a ripple moved through the courtroom. Evelyn's jaw clenched so hard a muscle jumped near her ear. Riley listened without reacting. Her stomach turned anyway. When it was time for Riley to testify, Reyes touched her elbow lightly. Riley walked to the stand. The oath felt like a formality, but her voice stayed steady when she swore to tell the truth. She sat, palms resting on the edge of the witness box, keeping her fingers still. The prosecutor approached with a file in hand. His voice was calm. "Dr. Harper, can you describe the events of the night Tyler Whitman was brought to your trauma bay?" Riley looked at the jury. 12 faces. Some attentive, some guarded, some already forming opinions. She began. She spoke in sensory detail the way memory held it. The doors opening at 2:47. Rain and boots. Blue lips. The puncture mark, the tissue necrosis, pinpoint pupils. Maddox dismissing her. The refusal to authorize talks. The blackout, the glass shattering, The dark liquid on the floor. Cole Whitman's breach team. Evelyn covering her son. Riley slamming the alarm, the gunshot into the ceiling. She did not embellish. She did not dramatize. She let the truth carry its own weight. The prosecutor lifted a photograph. "Is this the puncture mark you observed?" "Yes," Riley said. He lifted a lab report. "And this is the toxicology result for Tyler Whitman." "Yes." He lifted another report. "And this is the chemical analysis of the liquid recovered from the shattered vial." Riley's throat tightened. "Yes." The prosecutor's voice stayed steady. "Were those compounds consistent?" Riley met the jury's eyes. "Yes." The prosecutor nodded and stepped back. No further questions. The defense attorney rose slowly, buttoning his jacket with deliberate calm. He approached the stand like he owned the floor. "Dr. Harper," he said, voice smooth. "You are a resident." "Yes." "You have been a doctor for how long?" Riley kept her voice even. "Less than 2 years." The defense attorney nodded as if that was the only truth that mattered. "And you have never run a code blue as the lead physician." Riley felt heat rise in her chest. "I have run codes under supervision." "That is not what I asked," the attorney said. Riley held his gaze. "No, not as the official lead." The attorney smiled slightly. "So, on this night, in a room full of seasoned staff, you decided you knew better than an attending with decades of experience." Riley's jaw tightened. "I decided the patient's presentation required toxicology." The attorney tilted his head. "Toxicology? Based on what?" "Your feelings." Riley's voice stayed flat. "Based on pinpoint pupils and a puncture mark with surrounding tissue injury inconsistent with routine IV access." The attorney glanced at the jury, then back at Riley. "You have a brother who died of overdose." Riley felt her breath catch, but her voice did not move. The report said overdose. The attorney's eyes narrowed. "And you were emotionally invested." Riley let a beat of silence pass. Then she answered. "I was clinically observant." The attorney leaned closer. "You are saying you saw a puncture mark and decided this was attempted murder." Riley looked at him steadily. "I said it was an injection site inconsistent with normal care and consistent with an external administration." The toxicology confirmed it. The attorney lifted a finger. "But in that moment you did not have the toxicology. You had suspicion. And you accused Dr. Maddox." Riley's voice stayed calm. "I did not accuse Dr. Maddox to the room. I requested tests and secured evidence." The attorney's smile tightened. "And you believe Dr. Maddox orchestrated a plot to kill the president's son." Riley glanced at Maddox. His face was calm, almost bored. Riley turned back. "Agent Cole Whitman stated Dr. Maddox was supposed to handle it." Tyler Whitman stated Dr. Maddox warned him to stop digging. "The chemical evidence links the vial and the patient's tox." The defense attorney's eyes flashed. "You are repeating hearsay." The prosecutor objected. The judge spoke voice firm. "The jury will consider the evidence in context. Proceed." The defense attorney adjusted his stance, trying a different angle. "Dr. Harper, in the hallway fire incident, you injured Dr. Maddox." Riley's pulse kicked. I defended myself. "With a scalpel," the attorney said, letting the word hang. Riley's voice did not change. "He approached me with a syringe containing a toxic agent. I disarmed him." The attorney's gaze sharpened. "You were trained in self-defense by the FBI." Riley met his eyes. "Yes. So you had a relationship with federal agents prior to this event." Riley's jaw tightened. "They asked questions about my brother's death. I cooperated." The attorney spread his hands. "So you are not an impartial witness. You are part of their operation." Riley's voice stayed steady. "I am a doctor who treated a poisoned patient and preserved evidence." The attorney stared at her for a long second, then stepped back. No further questions. Riley stepped down from the stand with her knees trembling, but her spine straight. Tessa caught her elbow briefly, grounding her with a squeeze. "You did not blink?" Tessa murmured. Riley swallowed. "I wanted to." The trial continued. More witnesses, more documents. Cole Whitman's cooperation. Financial trails. messages, Maddox's deposits timed like payouts. When the closing arguments ended, the jury left the room. Time stretched. Riley sat with her hands clasped so tightly her fingers ached. She stared at the seal on the wall behind the judge's bench until the lines blurred. The jury returned. The foreperson stood. Riley felt Evelyn's presence beside Tyler like a held breath. The verdict was read aloud, each count landing like a hammer. Guilty. Maddox did not react at first. Then his eyes moved slowly to Riley. Not anger, not panic, a look that felt like a measurement. When the judge pronounced sentence, Maddox's jaw tightened. The sound of the gavel echoed, and the courtroom shifted, people exhaling, some crying quietly, some simply sitting in stunned silence. Deputies approached Maddox. He stood. As they guided him away, he turned his head once more toward Riley. His eyes held a message Riley had learned to recognize in the trauma bay. Not apology. A calculation that had reached its end. Then he was gone. Outside the courthouse, cameras surged forward like a wave. Reporters shouted questions, microphones extended. Riley felt the heat of lights and the press of bodies. Rhea stepped in front of her, creating space with her shoulder and badge. Tessa stayed close. Tyler and Evelyn exited behind them, surrounded by agents. A reporter shouted, "Dr. Harper, how does it feel to be the resident who saved the president's son?" Riley stopped and turned, not to the cameras, but to the crowd of faces. She kept her voice calm, loud enough to carry. "It feels like a shift I will never forget," she said. Another reporter called, "Are you afraid?" Riley looked toward the courthouse doors, then back to the crowd. "I am going back to work." The words were simple, true, not dramatic. Reyes guided her forward again, through the noise, toward a vehicle waiting at the curb with dark windows and an agent's hand on the door. Riley climbed inside, the city blurring past as the car moved. Her hands trembled in her lap. She reached into her bag and touched the edge of Luke's photo, feeling the worn paper under her fingers. Tessa's voice came from beside her, quiet. "You got him." Riley looked out the window at the gray sky over Richmond. "We did." Reyes sat in the front seat, eyes on the road. Her voice carried back, clipped and calm. "You go back to Norfolk today. Protective detail remains in place." Riley nodded once. The car rolled forward through traffic, leaving the courthouse behind, carrying Riley back toward the hospital that had become a battlefield and toward the work that still waited for her hands.